Hello, Merle, and welcome to Speaking of Everything. With me, I have the leader of the PFP party, MP Gumbs. How you doing, MP?
I'm good, Oral. How are you?
All right, great. We had to do it all over.
Yes, and GB.
Yeah, I know. So I'm wondering who I'm going to send this bill to. You have Froby, right? I just pull your leg.
Yeah.
So congratulations, 5 years of PFP.
Yes, 5 years of the Party for Progress. We celebrate on the 28th of September at TJ's Cassava Coal Pot, which is we have quite a storied history with TJ's. It's at our launch party at our launch event in 2019. Jul Dal actually helped with setting up the catering for that. I was running around getting everything in order. We had finalized our registration and such. And she kind of really stepped in and helped to, organize what would be there. I didn't know what to do. I'm like, what do we do for snacks? She's like, look, you keep it simple. A soup, Johnny cakes, we have a graze board, some light snacks in the beginning.
Yeah. I
would bring people to take care of the bar and everything like that. So you just figure out, what you're going to say and how you're going to get people there. And it really, so we're taking it back to where it all started with TJ's and reflected on 5 years as a party in which a lot has happened in the last 5 years for the party. We launched and didn't expect to have to go into an election so soon after that.
Wow.
But yeah, St. Martin is St. Martin, so ended up, yeah.
This is your third election now? 5 years?
Yes, the snap election was our third election in 5 years, yeah. So
it's
hopefully not another one for the next 4 years.
But people are really predicting, and that's unfortunate because these elections cost us a lot of money.
Yes, they cost money, time, and they cost energy. I think that to me is the most the worst resource that we waste is just energy and productivity, because a campaign sucks you in, and it's a drain. I myself, now catching myself from campaign time and election time, and I think that to me, when I listen to people and I talk to people, the weariness and the heaviness of the whole process is it's what impacts our people the most. Yeah.
So what was different before and this one? Because the two previous elections you ran in, was it different than this last one of the 19th of August?
I think the snap election for the 19th of August, the energy was different. Just in general, like on the road, when you were talking to persons, there was a definite shift in people who had previously supported like legacy parties, which you could see reflected in their results. Just a general frustration that they kind of took it out on them at the polls, and exhaustion. Yeah, people were very tired. Many did not want to vote, so I'm happy that the turnout still landed where it did, because I was very fearful that it might have been even less. And we want your population, your voting population, to participate in your democracy. When you see numbers start to drop, you should be worried, that people are not interested and they're not putting themselves out there to participate in their future, basically. Yeah.
The PFP, what your party stands for as a political party?
We've always stood for progressive principles, moving us forward in not just tourism and building, buildings, but in building our people, moving us forward from an academic standpoint, a professional standpoint, diversification of our economy through education, and a commitment as well to improving financial management and public spending. I think what we've seen is, there are things that we spend money on, and yes, things have their budget, but you have to really dig down and prioritize, especially in the situation that we're in right now. We have low capacity in terms of certain competencies and skill sets in government and in throughout the public sector. You have low resources in terms of finances. So it's a real, a very holistic approach we have to take, I think. And that's tough because persons don't really comprehend that. It is a mental shift that has to happen. And we've always advocated for that. We have to have difficult conversations to be able to make difficult choices, because sometimes those are the correct choice to make.
How you feel as a political party and, say, business? Because there's some political parties who view business as totally different, and they feel they can make it without business. How you feel as a political party? you see that working together with you, or is
You mean in terms of like private sector?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you definitely need private sector. You have to be able to meet stakeholders in the middle. There has to be compromise, but then there's also times where you have to have a vision set forward as a government, and businesses will eventually have to get on board. I think that's also something that there's a balance you have to strike between anything that you do, any relationship that you have, and the public and the private sector have to strike that balance of, we want business, but at the same time, you also need the development of people. You need education, you need social aid, you need, your society has to be at a point where everybody can thrive. Because if society is not thriving, business is going to struggle either way. And I think that's something we don't really correlate here when we think about our economy.
Well, how you describe it, it seems like that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when people felt like there was a political party that was favored by business and one that was not favored by business. Yeah. And people say, well, when this party is in power, we did well. When the other power, we did bad.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, I think, we look at as a small honor like Zimbabwe.
Yeah, for sure. But like I said, even then, I think if you look around the world, you have to strike that balance between hypercapitalism and the reality that you are a small island. So just how much capitalism can you sustain, especially when we look at developments. We've talked about it. At the end of the day, our land is limited. There are going to be instances where we have to prioritize what we want to see. Do we want to, see that there's greenery, that we are an island, or do we want to lean on the end of, well, it's just going to be concrete everywhere with units that most locals are not buying and cannot afford. And that's that balancing act that you have to get into. But to do that balancing act, you have to be able to make decisions, and you have to be willing to make tough decisions sometimes.
There's a lot of concern that many of the politicians and those that are elected have never owned a business. Mm-hmm. So they don't really understand the intricacies of running a business.
Right.
And sometimes that goes contrary to what the business community wants.
Yeah, I can see the sense in that. And I think, I've never run a business, but I have worked in private sector my whole life. I have said, publicly that there's a certain mentality that comes with coming from private sector. A good example was COVID. So when COVID started, I remember saying to former MP Peterson at the time, we're going to have to cut our salaries because this is going to be rough on the economy, on the community. And, even if it's not a thing that we could say, well, we're going to cut our salaries and then that goes into this particular pot, we should at least in solidarity. Because, I remember when I was working at Sinesta Maho, 2007, the U.S. housing crash, they told us all, you have to cut 10% of your salary because if not, we're not going to have a job. And that's something that I think in private sector you do understand. Like, it's either a small sacrifice now to make sure that there's still income, or it could be no job at all. And I think that the private sector balanced that rather well. Many people drain their savings to keep their business going, to be able to pay their employees, maybe less than they were paying them, but that was a necessary sacrifice. The same way that I had to deal with it when the U.S. housing crisis hit. There were no people flying. People were not coming here. And, the point of a hotel is to get heads in beds, as they say. And I remember that my one protest at the time was that if you cut everybody across the board 10%, it hurts. It hurts some more than it hurts me. A housekeeper and a manager are not on the same level. So my one complaint was, try not to cut housekeeping and just cut the managers and keep it at that.
You're speaking, and I'm getting a flashback, 1984. And I don't know if you is familiar with 1984 and the former Nelson Tilly's and that tax, that 10% additional that it added on. And what I didn't know at the time was that the government of St. Martin did not comply with the federal government request to have also civil servants take part in that. So I was working as a manager in Muller Bay.
Yeah.
And I saw 10% went off my salary, whoop, just like that. Yeah. And that was bad.
Yeah.
In hindsight, at that time, the Nelson Tilly was in a very, very bad situation.
Yeah. And in those situations, I think when you're in a crisis, the first thing that you should tell yourself is that your entitlements are gone. They're done. They're the first thing to go, actually. And it's something that, again, I've had to learn it from private sector. The U.S. housing crisis, later on when I worked in the Netherlands, the Greek debt crisis that required the EU to, send financial assistance. And they calculated down to a T what that would cost every taxpaying Dutch citizen. I think they told us it would cost the average tax-paying citizen in the Netherlands an extra 400 euros a year. I have to double check, but they brought it down to that dollars and cents for us. And many managers at the company that I worked, they were entitled to cars, laptops, etc. But they were like, no, absolutely not. Those things are out the window, reduction in vacation pay. Like, that's the reality that private sector has to deal with. And I think public servants don't normally have that approach, because in public service, that you're going to get paid. And I'm not saying that's every civil servant, but definitely it's a cultural shift when it comes to our approach to work that has to happen. And yeah, it's a difficult. Everywhere you turn in politics is a balancing act that you have to strike.
When you look at the party, PFP, the Party for Progress, but when you look at St. Martin today, we're 14 years now in this special arrangement within the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Yes.
And before I go to what I want to ask you, how you feel about this arrangement? Or, as a leader of a political party, do you feel St. Martin is a colony, or is St. Martin a part of the Netherlands, another colony?
I mean, there's different definitions, I think. Most people will say that if you're not able to make your own decisions and such without, conditions, etc., that you're still a colony. But if you take it out of that conversation and you really look at geopolitics and the realities of it as a whole, most countries, whether they are big European countries, former colonizers, colonizing countries and such, everybody has somebody to answer to. There's no such thing as free money. And this is something that I've said in Parliament before, because you have a lot of misinformation where, for example, with Irma, persons are like, well, the Dutch gave Dominica $30 million, no questions asked. You don't know that. And that does not happen. There's literally no such thing as you getting any type of money from a country or a lending agency with no questions asked.
It's a quid pro quo.
Yeah, there will always be a condition somewhere. It's whether it is I expect your support at the UN level on a particular matter, or I expect you to do this with the money and not that with the money. Everything comes with a condition. You can't go to a bank and get a loan and you tell them it's for a car and then you decide to use it to fix a fence. That's the I think it's unfortunate that that's the misinformation that's kind of been perpetuated to make it sound as though we are somehow getting a different type of scenario than anywhere else. Now, there are definitely things that the Netherlands has done that I disagree with, tying, for example, the interest rates of the refinance COVID loans to an ENYA solution. I think those are an apple and a banana that you're trying to shove into the same basket. However, the notion that there's just money that does not come with guidelines, etc., on how to spend it, when it should be spent, and what happens if it's not spent, we may have taken a very lax approach to concepts such as subsidization, where we give subsidy to organizations and we don't follow up on how it's spent as a government, as a country. But just because we take that lax approach does not mean that everywhere else in the world does. And that's something that it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's, as a party as well, we're very committed to just being honest and not sugarcoating things and not making excuses for either ourselves or for previous governments or future governments. And I think that is important if we want to see St. Martin move forward.
So I guess my question is, St. Martin a colony, in your opinion, as leader of the PFP? Yes.
In my opinion, if we look at the general concepts of what colonialism was, we could still be considered a colony, but if you really get down to it, what we are demanding is sovereignty, but you cannot have sovereignty without solvency. And most countries are struggling with that right now. The world is struggling with that. The world itself doesn't have solvency.
If you're going to tie it to that.
Yeah, but that's really what it is. And I look at, we have been able to decide our own affairs for quite some time. even from before as the Netherlands Antilles. Education, for example, something that has been within our decision-making capabilities.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
You know why I'm glad you mentioned that? Because for over 40 years, from the time I started this program, that's been an issue in the Nelson Antilles.
Yes.
Jack Veris was Minister of Education in 1984. He was on this program in April of 1984. The same problem still exists today.
Yes.
Now you're going in as Minister.
Yes, all goes well. I will be going in as Minister of Education. Thank you. No, it's again,
tough, huh?
it's tough because there are tough decisions to be made, and I think persons have not made them because they're not politically palatable. But I've been always very vocal that if we continue to do that, then first of all, there's no point for me to be here, because I think that difficult decision making is necessary. Coming from private sector, you have to do that all the time. And if you're not willing to do it in public sector, then nothing is going to move forward. There is actually no progress without sometimes making a decision that, maybe it doesn't make one or two people happy, but it benefits the whole.
So it's gonna be very interesting.
Yes.
I'm telling you, why? I had a discussion with someone, and I said, boy, even if the minister have all the good intentions and a good plan to make the change, the resistance and the culture within the ministry makes it extremely difficult.
I've heard that as well. And I think, persons get accustomed to a certain way of working. And that happens everywhere. Whether you're in public sector or private sector, if you join I can tell you as someone who's been either on the board or involved with many nonprofit organizations, it is the same everywhere you go. Persons get accustomed to working a certain way, and it's tough to get that change to come about. And I also think that there is a lack of trust between the ministry, so the minister at that level, and the departments. And I think, if you take an active role in trying to rebuild that trust, in trying to make that area a safe space for the persons that have to operate in it, I think that beautiful things can happen. But of course, you'll always have one or two that are committed to being bad eggs. Yeah. But then there's another difficult decision to be made.
That's true.
And that's not something that we've seen anyone really make when it comes to government.
Well, I smiled and said, beautiful things can happen. You saw like Donald Trump there. It's funny,
yeah.
In case you joined us, this is Speaking of Everything. I'm Earl Gibbs. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio. My guest is the leader of the PFP party, MP, comes soon to be minister. So there are going to be two ministers. Three? Oh my God. You guys remind me of the 1980s with the Richardsons. I tell you what, we got to go to a break. We're going to come right back right here and speak of everything. Please do this. My guest is the leader of the PFP party, MP Gumbs, soon to be Minister Gumbs. You're here with us on Hot 99.9 FM radio, Facebook, and YouTube. MP, it's an amazing thing when you look at politics, because a lot of people don't trust politicians.
Yes.
But you know what? You can't do without them.
Yeah.
Somebody got to take the heat, right?
Yes.
And I think we oftentimes don't realize the sacrifice and the time involved. Now you're moving from being a member of parliament to becoming a minister. So now your work schedule is going to be 25 hours a day.
Yes, basically. I'm preparing for it with my family, with my partner. We're definitely how do we work it out, that you can still have kind of a life, I guess. But this is a sacrifice that I've been well aware of since I was a kid. Remember, my dad grew up in this. Yeah. And I think I tell everybody all the time when they talk about, well, Parliament is so hard because, you're away from your family, your kid. I'm like, here's the thing. Our parliament is now on St. Martin. Imagine having to have your parent in Curacao for a week, and then if something goes wrong, a meeting runs late, budget or whatever, they're there for 2 weeks, and then they're back here and then gone again. So definitely those kids that went through it, myself, the kids of Miss Marie Boncampo, Molanis, they know very well what that sensation is like. So now at least you're on the island. The travel is not as prominent, so you can at least have that sense of normalcy with your family. But it is definitely a sacrifice, and I always tell people and I said it in my remarks at the closing of the parliamentary term, before the new MPs swore in. I said, if you do this job right, sleep is not a thing that's going to come easy. Because it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of information, and it's also knowing and recognizing the reality facing many St. Martiners today. And that, if you have a heart and you have a conscience and empathy, that should you should not be sleeping well.
Your party is a very close-knit political party, similar to what the SPM was back in the 1970s when it started, I think.
Yes, 79, I think,
right? Yeah. And when you look at the party today, because just recently there was a video that came out with one of your party members, and seems to be some friction. How is that now? Is that all
I think for me it's fine, I always remain professional, and I know that the way that we do things is very different. Culturally it's always been culturally I don't say it always been. I think since the introduction of the lynch law, it's become a very individualistic minded political arena. And I remember saying to, my dad and others at the start of putting down the roots of what is now PFP, I said, we have to remain committed to doing it differently, to changing our political arena and our political culture. And I think we've done a good job at that so far. Most parties now are trying in some way or the other to match the way we campaign. 2 people going on interviews, team campaigning, team walkthroughs, etc. All of that that's the impact of us, and it's something I'm very proud of as party leader, because in the beginning, we had a lot of detractors who said, you'll never be able to change things that way. That's not how we are as a people. And I think it shows the capacity for St. Martiners to change, which is why when persons tell me, even if, they're like, it's going to be difficult in education, it's going to be difficult in VROMI, it's going to be difficult in government, and in parliament, because we are a people that are stuck, I say, well, clearly we can get unstuck. Even if it's that, parties are trying to mimic us, even if they can't be us, because, they're not like us. At the end of the day, we've shown that the voters also have capacity to change. And that's important. I think that people have to hold on to that and never say that, we're just kind of stuck in this cycle. We have the ability to change. And I believe that it just takes one or a small group of some to just do it. Really, like Nike, sometimes you just have to do it. And when you do it, others will say, okay, the world didn't end if we did it differently, so let's continue with that. And again, this is not something that I try to drill everything back to just that is how human relationships work, that's how teams work. Whether you're private sector, non-profit, public sector, a blend of all, you're going to encounter persons that are like, well, this is how we've always, made this bottle. And someone comes along and says, or we could do it this way. And, you just have to try it and do it. And then eventually it's going to streamline on its own. And I think we've been afraid as people to kind of make some sweeping changes. And as a party, we will always be committed to that. No matter what the mentality of the culture may be, we have our principles and values and our own culture. And that's what's going to prevail internally. So that's how we approach everything.
No, change doesn't come easy.
No, not at all.
It's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, when it comes to government, though, boy, I really wish you luck. And I hope a year from now, I can ask you how it's going.
Maybe give me a year and a half.
No, but I know it's tough.
Yeah.
And I know you mean well. I know everyone means well.
Yes.
And the thing is that for a lot of our local politicians, okay, guys like me now, we're not like before, we're more quiet and more relaxed, but we can say things that a politician or leader may not like.
Yeah.
And they'll walk around upset and very angry about what was said, instead of picking up the phone and say, "Hi, Earl, you made a statement, I don't agree with that. Why you say that?" There's only one politician I know that used to do that was Frankie. My husband.
Yeah.
He's back now, but
Yes.
I don't know if he's the same.
Yeah.
But because that's important. You never know why something is said. Maybe the person didn't have all the information.
Yeah.
So too often, politicians get angry with the media and later on try to take it out, not really realizing that there's a way to get to that.
Yeah, and I think many have also become accustomed to being able to pay certain media houses to say the things that they would like them to say.
But I don't know. I've heard that before.
Yeah.
But I would never accept payment to say what a politician wants.
Well, yeah, because that's actual journalism.
Yeah.
But you have persons that in the community that fashion themselves as journalists or media houses. But ultimately, I tell people, when you really when you study words and you study communications and how words are used to kind of influence and such. I always know when someone has been fed a story. I know when someone's been fed a question. I listen to press briefings sometimes and I can tell, okay, well, that was a plant of a question. Wow. Yeah. And I think, so for me, it's always funny because I prefer honest criticism. I have gotten criticism from some media houses and I'm like, okay, I ignore it. Because not all criticism I should listen to or I should take seriously or react to. There's constructive criticism and then there's just you have nothing to say and you're essentially just saying something to say something. And I also know not to take everything personal. But sometimes persons want to be personal just to get a reaction. But I also understand, again, my father was in politics for 23 years of my life because he entered the year that I was born. In 1983. And so I grew up having to deal with comments about him, etc. If I was a different person, I would have been fighting every day, You
won't be a politician.
I wouldn't be a politician right now. I would have been fighting every day if I would take everything personally. But sometimes, and I said it as well when in my sort of farewell remarks to the outgoing Prime Minister, I said, there were times where I found myself as a woman in politics defending her because a lot of the criticism was not about politics, it was about the personal.
Yeah.
And that should never be the case. That I don't listen to. I don't care about it. Persons say it because that's something within themselves that they're insecure about, that they need to address for themselves. But for me, if you're telling me that, look, you could have been a little more vocal about this in Parliament, absolutely. I always listen to that type of criticism and I take it to, heart and I try to do differently. But if it's just comments for comments' sake and speculation and Millie Rosin, I don't have time for that.
We're running out of time.
No problem.
So I know there's a lot we can speak about, but we'll do that on another show.
Yes.
But again, I want to really congratulate you.
Thank you.
And your party for celebrating 5 years and wish you all much success.
Thank you very much.
And you have a minute in closing, anything you want to add?
No, just to thank everyone for the support over these 5 years. It has been a whirlwind of a journey, and it continues, and I look forward to receiving that continued support and the constructive feedback and criticism as we continue on as PFP.
Well, again, I want to wish you MP much success.
Thank you.
And when we have you back next time, you'll be minister.
Yes, all God's pay our lives, as they say.
All right, good. Take care. All the best.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for now on. Speaking of everything, YouTube, Facebook, and on Hot 99.9 FM radio. Take care. Bye.